Welcome back to Management Consulting 101, where I'll be sharing tips, tricks, strategies to help your application stand out if you're considering management consulting at MBBs. Today, let's talk about consulting behaviors that you need to show during the interview. And I'm not talking about the tactical ones, right? How to draft a recommendation, how to go through exhibits. I'm not talking about those. We will cover those in another episode. I'm going to tell you about behaviors that the interviewers are really watching out for. And you need to know because you are evaluated on those behaviors, whether you like it or not. By the time you go into the interview, I know you've memorized all the frameworks there are. How do I know? Because I did the same thing. The first time I applied into MBB and I didn't get in, I went through, I think, 500 cases. I was mostly going through these cases by myself. That is mistake number one, by the way. Yeah, go through them by yourself just to familiarize yourself with the frameworks, but practice with someone. I would rather you practice with someone, you do 20 cases, you practice with someone, than go through 1,000 cases by yourself. And so I went into the interviews, especially round one, and I felt like the questions were so easy, if you ask me. I didn't get in, and there is a reason, because they are not interested in the frameworks and not interested in the calculations. Don't get me wrong, they are. But really, those are just facade. That is just the front office. Really, what the interviewer is looking for are some of the behaviors behind the scene. And if you understand these behaviors, then you will just do 10 or 20 cases, but then watch out for these behaviors that the interviewer is really watching out for. It's like understanding the principles, the mechanics behind why we do things. It's like if someone told you 11 plus 9 is 20, and then you go ahead and just memorize. You just know when I see 9 and I see 11 and I see a plus sign in between them, the answer is 20. That will not take you so far, because remember we said frameworks has to be adapted to meet the client context, nuances, and everything. And if you're using the framework as is from the textbook that you read, you are using it wrong. It has to be adapted. And for you to adapt it, not only the framework, but also for you to adapt yourself during the interview, you need then to understand the mechanics, the reasoning, the principles behind why we tell you all these tactical things, right? We tell you when the interviewer is reading the question, you make notes and you replay to the interviewer to make sure you understand. But why? Why can't you just go ahead and do the question and then ask the interviewer down the line, hey, by the way, remind me what you said earlier. Why do we want to make sure that we've captured everything before we begin? Why do we want to hypothesize or prioritize? Why are we communicating in top-down communication approach or structured manner? Understand the reasoning principles behind all these tactical skills, and you are way ahead of so many other people. Because then you can adapt the framework, and also you can adapt yourself and how you are demonstrating and the skills and behaviors you're demonstrating during the interview. Because the goal is not to arrive at the right answer using the correct framework. I'm putting correct in quotes because there is no correct framework. I mean, there are correct-ish framework, but it has to be adapted to the case at hand. You can't just lift framework that you read somewhere and use it as is. You might still, like we mentioned, use the correct framework, arrive at the right answer, and I think I did during my first time trying. But we said interviewers are watching out for more than the frameworks you memorized, more than the tactical skills that you are demonstrating. Top 5 of my favorites. Skill number 1. They are hiring a managing partner, not an analyst, not a junior consultant. And I know you are surprised because you literally just applied for an analyst position, associate for a consultant, and you're wondering what the heck. I want you to imagine the processes behind recruitment. Like the hiring managers go through a lot. They spend a lot. They invest a lot. Money, human resource, everything to get you in. Those rounds of interviews, like all those hours that these hiring managers spend to get you in, they are not getting you in so that you leave in 1 year or 2 years. I know you know. Many people still leave the firm in 1 or 2 years, but they're also optimizing for the people who might stay longer. And so during the interview, they are not hiring for the immediate role that you will join. You will join as an analyst, yes, but they are watching out. Is this person already demonstrating some skills, some behaviors, and some instincts of a partner? You might not have all the skills that a managing partner has, but surely there are some that you can start demonstrating, and they are watching out for those. Because then once you are in, those can be fine-tuned, and in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, you are a managing partner. And so, assignment number 1. Do you know what senior partners, managing partners in these firms, do you know what they do? I would say start from there. Example, they own client relationship. What does that mean? Owning client relationship. They drive business development. And what does that mean? They communicate closely with the C-suite in these Fortune 500 companies. How do you communicate with a CFO, a CEO of these big companies? They sell the next engagement. What does that mean? Selling the next engagement, like bringing business into the company. Let me give you a very good example that I know you've come across. They tell you during a case, when you are preparing recommendation at the end of the case, they encourage you to add something along the lines. In this case, we just looked at the cost side of things. If we had more time, we would look at the revenue, particularly the pricing. Or they tell you to add. As a next step, I would look at revenue, particularly this. Why? Literally what you've just done, if you write a recommendation and you add next step, like what else would you look at? You've literally sold business. You've literally just sold the next level of engagement. And if you did a good job in this first engagement, the client will be like, okay, what do you need for you to start the next level of engagement? And so that is already demonstrating that you can sell business, or you can look ahead and see what else can we sell to the clients. And that is one of the skills that the hiring manager will be so glad to see. And immediately the hiring manager stops thinking, can this person solve a case? And they start thinking, I can actually put this person in front of a client tomorrow. Skill number 2, you own the client and own the project. This kind of goes back to what we just said. If you walk into the interview knowing that the hiring manager is hoping that you become a managing partner at some point, and so you start demonstrating those things. One thing that they do, or they encourage people to do from day one, is owning the project and owning the client. What does that mean? And I'll give you a very practical example. So like we mentioned, they encourage you to write notes when the interviewer is reading out the case. And then at the end, you replay to make sure you've understood everything about the case, the nuances, and then the question or the problem to be solved. Why are you doing that? During that process, literally, the interviewer is, whether you like it or not, they are literally transferring the case to you so that you own it. Once they've read the case to you and you've made sure that you've understood everything, the case is no longer with the interviewer. The case is now yours. And so when you are writing notes, you are literally owning it. You are like, okay, I need to capture everything because now this is my thing now. And especially, I think it works for interviewer as well, interviewer-led, but mostly for interviewee-led. Because after that, henceforth, you are on the driving wheel. You are the one driving this bus. You are the one driving the case forward. You are the one owning the project, deciding where it goes, and owning the client. A good example, they encourage you to own a client mean you no longer say your client said, or when you go through the calculations and then you tell the interviewer, you said in the beginning, or you told me this. The language shifts. All of a sudden you say our client, because you are owning that client now. As you go through the calculation, you're like, oh, I've gotten 4%, but I remember that our client wanted something around 20%. And so what this means for our client is that the client is now yours and the project is yours. What that also means, owning the project, means always sharing your perspectives, driving the case forward, asking for alignment. You are no longer asking for direction. You are not asking the interviewer, where should we go next? They do not know. They've just transferred everything to you and you are now the owner of the project. And so you propose next steps and then you just ask, if you agree, let's go this direction. You don't say, should we go this direction? You propose the direction and then just confirm that it's okay, because you are the owner of the project. So to show ownership, you observe, you hypothesize, you propose the next step, and then you ask for alignment. So something like, based on what I'm seeing, I just calculated and I've gotten 4%. So you've observed that you've gotten 4%, or you've observed data on the exhibit. So hypothesis, what is the hypothesis? So my initial hypothesis is that the main driver is the raw materials. And my I propose we prioritize and start with checking the cost of raw materials, particularly for product number B. And if you agree, I'll start doing the calculations. Observe, hypothesize, propose the next step, ask for alignment. That is how you demonstrate that you are driving the project. The project is now yours, you are driving it, you are owning it, and you are also owning the client. Number 3, always lead with a hypothesis. Senior consultants, senior partners, they never go into client place. They never go in blind. From the moment they get the brief about the case, they are instantly forming a working, reasonable hypothesis. And then they use this initial hypothesis, to guide, prioritize where they want to start spending time, their analytical time. So in an interview, quickly generating a working hypothesis, even if it's imperfect, even if it's wrong, as long as it's logical and it makes sense for you, the way you explain it, it shows that business instinct. It also keeps you from what they like to call it boiling the ocean. Like you have so many things to look at and you are trying to look at all of them at one go, and it just cannot work. Do not worry. If your hypothesis is wrong, most likely it's wrong. As you get the data or as you get the steer from the interviewer, you keep updating. And before long, you actually arrive at the right hypothesis. So for instance, given what we know about our client, remember, you own that client. It's not their client. It's not the interviewer's client. It's now your client. So given what we know about our client and the fact that they shifted their supplier to an overseas supplier in the last 2 years, my initial hypothesis is that the decline in profitability could be because of the increase in costs, particularly cost of raw materials, rather than on the revenue side. And so to prioritize as a next step, I would like to look more closely at the variable costs, the cost of raw materials, particularly material number B, that goes into most of their products. Do we have any data on that? You see what we've just done, and it goes back to the previous point of you observe, you make a hypothesis, you propose the next step, and then only then you pause and wait for alignment. And so always have hypothesis. I was so worried that I'm making wrong hypothesis. Consulting works is like opposite what I was used to working with. Coming from engineering and loving numbers and maths, I would do the calculation first. And then from the calculation, then I figure out if it's wrong or if it's right. But in business, you start with a hypothesis before you even dig into the calculation. And if you are always waiting for the way I was waiting for the data to calculate the data to therefore make a conclusion, you are acting as an analyst. And remember, the interviewer is not hiring an analyst. I know you just submitted for an application for an analyst, but they are looking at, in the next 5 years, is this person showing the skills that we can develop into a senior? You do not want to wait until the data tells you where to go. You need to have a working hypothesis even as you dig into the calculation. Number 4, you need to always answer, so what? And so what next? After every exhibit, every calculation, every framework, every step, really every step is so what and so what next? Those two things, and I want you to literally force those two things. Sprinkle them throughout, wherever it's applicable. Sprinkle them, force them. Use the exact words. So what this means for our client is this, and so what next is this. This was something really difficult for me to wrap my mind around, but that number is never the answer. I was just so comfortable with calculating 2 + 2 is 4, and then full stop. In business, they do not care. 4 can just mean anything. In business, in consulting, the implication and so what next is the most important thing after that number. So every time you complete a calculation, you look at exhibit, your next question should answer the question, so what does this mean for our client? An example, you've just gone through a lengthy calculation. You've been walking the interviewer through your thoughts as you are calculating, and then in the end you get 10%. And let's assume 10% is the correct answer. If you just say the answer is 10%, that's wrong. Like it or not, that's wrong. Because the interviewer is watching out to see if you're showing business acumen and interpreting what 10% mean for our client and for the case we are solving. And so you could say something like this. From all this calculation, I get 10%. And given what we know about our client, that they are targeting 30%, this means that the lever we just looked at is not enough to hit our client's target. As a next step, I propose we look at the next level, particularly level number C, to see if we can inch closer to our client's target. And if you are aligned to that, I will begin. What this means is next step, and then just make sure you are always linking back all the numbers, all the interpretation. You always have the running question somewhere here. You are always checking your interpretations, your answers against the running question. The calculation exhibits are not stand-alone. Number 5, demonstrate 80-20 thinking. This is really big. As an engineer and person who went through a PhD, this is by far the hardest skill. It took me ages to make sense and to start operating 80-20. I'm also a perfectionist, and so I like to just analyze everything. Do not leave anything on the table. Just if I have 10 things to analyze, I want to be sure that I've analyzed everything before I make a conclusion and move on. That's not how consulting works. Out of the 10 things you have on your table, you figure out what are 2 things, 2 out of 10. What are 20% of these 10 things that I have that contribute around 70% or 80% of the outcome? And then you prioritize that with those 2 things. Only then, if you do not get what you want from the 2, then you get another batch of things to prioritize. Prioritize is everything here. And I'm assuming that you know that 80-20 is this Pareto principle that states that roughly 80% of all outcomes or results, they come from 20% of courses or inputs. Just like I explained. It doesn't happen all the time, but watch out for 80-20 and just make sure you mention that in the interview. So for instance, after doing the calculations or quickly scanning through the data or the exhibit to help you prioritize the next step, you could say something like this. Looking at all these 10 levers, cost levers from our client, it looks like procurement and manufacturing make 80% of total cost. And so to prioritize, I would like to start looking at these 2. Particularly start with manufacturing, because we know our client is going through some manufacturing changes at the moment. And so maybe the costs there could be the reason. If you agree, I'll start doing the calculation. You see, you are using 80-20 to prioritize, but again, you have to propose the next step and then ask for alignment. You are not asking for direction. It's you providing direction and just confirming, are we aligned with this direction that I've proposed? So those are top 5 favorite behaviors that I came to learn a bit later. And I wish someone had told me earlier so that I don't waste time just memorizing frameworks and arriving at the right answer, thinking that is what they want. It's not a maths Olympiad. It's a business case. And so if you understand these behaviors and start practicing those behaviors every time you're practicing with a partner, you just need 10 or 20 cases and you're good to go. What the interviewer is really looking out for, not what we are told to show. Don't get me wrong, they are still watching out for structured way of thinking and communicating. They are still watching out for how you do your recommendation. And so those tactical stuff is still important, and we'll cover them in another episode. But keep in mind these other behaviors that are also watching out for. Until the next episode, I wish you all the best. Do not forget to sign up for our masterclass in the coming weeks, in the coming months. So add your name there and we'll discuss more then.